Everybody to this PCA Live speaker series. We're going to get started here in just a second. We have many of you joining via webinar, and so thank you for that. We'll take care of a few logistical housekeeping. You can feel free to use the Q&A function on Zoom to ask any questions that you want to for us to pass along to Roman during this conversation. We will also be streaming this live on PCA's Facebook page. So we'll give that another minute or so just to get that up and running. And we'll be recording this, so we'll be able to provide some follow-up resources for everybody as well. But thanks so much for joining us for PCA's speaker series. And today's guest is going to be Roman Oben. We're going to get into that in just a minute or two, but just wanted to thank everybody for joining. And stay tuned as we get started here briefly. So we are now streaming live on Positive Coaching Alliance's Facebook page. So welcome to those of you that are joining us via Facebook. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat on our Facebook page. Those of you that are joining us via Zoom on the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function to send along any questions. But we are super excited to bring you another PCA Live speaker series powered by our friends at TeamSnap. And today we are excited to have Roman Oben join us. Roman is a 12-year veteran of the NFL. He's currently the Vice President of Football Operations for the league office, the NFL. And, as we approach the Super Bowl here coming up in about 10 days, we thought no better person to join us. Roman is a member of PCA's National Advisory Board. So Roman, thanks so much for being here with us today.
No, Jason, my pleasure. It's always great to catch up. And I know we've known each other for quite a few years, but it was definitely an honor to be asked to be on the board. And I'm looking forward to, obviously you mentioned the Super Bowl is coming up in 10 days, but definitely looking forward to serving this year on PCF board as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, let's talk about the Super Bowl a little bit with the Tampa Bay Bucks in the Super Bowl. And the last time they were in the Super Bowl was 2002, and you just happened to be the starting left tackle for that team that won the Super Bowl. So I want to try to rewind back to your preparation for that game and week leading up to it. What do you remember about just going into that game that week before, and where the players are right now? Obviously, it's a little different situation because of COVID and not necessarily having the full Super Bowl week, but down in Tampa. But just what do you remember about that experience as yourself as a player?
Well, I know we just had the 18th anniversary 2 days ago. So it was January 26, 2003. So which meant it was the last Super Bowl to be played that didn't have a bye week in between championship weekend and the Super Bowl. So it was in a 10-day stretch. We played the Eagles, got there Friday, beat them, landed late Sunday night. They had a little airport was blocked with people lined up and all that stuff because we were going to our first Super Bowl. And then the next morning we had to be ready to fly out by noon. So you couldn't even decompress from the game. And the game was played at San Diego Chargers back then, their stadium at Qualcomm. And so you get there and with the jet lag, you just crash. And then Tuesday's your day off, media day, and then you start the week. So it was really a blur for like 7 days. And I'm glad that we came out the end of it. Between that Super Bowl, I think the Super Bowl with the 48 with the Seahawks and the Broncos, that was a blowout when Manning came back. I mean, you hate to be on the opposite end of a blowout Super Bowl, but I'm glad that we won, and it was a great year for Gruden, and the fact that the Bucks have a chance to relive history and with Tom Brady now at the helm, I think it's great for the organization.
Yeah, I was reading up on that team back in 2002. And it talked about a little bit about just your offense and the run game that you had, and sort of how that run game had struggled a little bit. But in December and into January, it really started to come together. And you guys were, I think it was like 30 or 40 more yards per game that you were averaging. So talk about in a team environment, when things maybe aren't going how you hope they are, like how the team was able to come together and really improve throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think that because you had, I think, two or three new starters that year, you had
Yeah.
new personnel. You got rid of Work Done went to the Falcons, and we had Michael Pittman, and you
Mhm.
just started putting different pieces in play. You know, Rick Dudley was a tight end, Ken Dilger, who was at the Colts for a long time, and you know, a lot of people talk about, and I'll preface it with this: a lot of people talk about that being Dungy's team,
Mhm.
but it was really Gruden's offense that really got them over the hump, where they previously had never won a game under 40 degrees. But when Gruden got in, he brought in a lot of players. Like, I played for the Browns for 2 years before that, and the Giants before that. Kerry Jenkins, my guard, was came from the Jets. We had Joe Jurevicius and Ken Dilt were Big Ten guys, guys from up north, guys that weren't afraid to play the Eagles in January. I think it was deliberate, and I've talked to Gruden about that. He kind of laughs about it, but I think it was deliberate to revamp the offense, is saying we're not going to have guys dropping balls in January on the road. If we have to go to Green Bay or we have to go to one of these teams to win and get over the hump, we're
Yeah.
going to have guys that mentally are ready to do that. And obviously the defense was good. That was steady with Warren Sapp and Brooks and those guys. But I think the bigger picture, when you talk about the running game and the things that we did to kind of get over that hump, it was about believing in the process and believing in what we were doing.
Yeah.
It was about believing in and just continuing to grind and continue to drive and working for an end result that you didn't see yet. And so it does take a year or two to get most offensive lines to have that cohesion. But it took us a tough season. We were winning games. I mean, we beat the Bears 15-0, kicked 5 field goals to
Right.
win, to get a bye week. And we won some really close games, and thank God for our defense. But I think when things started to mature, they started to peak at the right time. And that's when you talked about the running game. I think we were only averaging 90 yards a game, and then we were 120 plus in the playoffs, which was
Yeah.
at the right time.
Yeah. What about when, in game situations, and I think this is something that coaches and parents and players at all levels can learn something from, but what did you do personally, or was there something that the line did or the team did when, if you made a mistake during the game, right? Like, we always talk about the most important play being the next play. So how did you, if there was a hold, or if you were called for a hold, or if you missed a block, how did you move on? How were you able to move on, leave that mistake where it is, and focus on the next play? What were some of the things that you did for that?
I think that because I wasn't, I think it was my sixth or seventh year in the NFL in '02 when we during that season, and we didn't have a lot of young offensive linemen. We had one or two. I think Kenyatta Walker was like his second or third year. But because we had veteran guys that had started and played and kind of been through that fire, we kind of learned to have the amnesia, what we call football amnesia. You got to
Mhm.
forget about the last play and focus on the next play. That's not new concept, but you always say offensive tackles and O linemen and the cornerbacks have to play with that amnesia, because you could get beat for a touchdown if you're a corner, and they're going to come back and throw that same post or that same ball and you're still going to have to go back and defend. And for us offensively, you only get credit or you only get your name called when it's a penalty or holding call, and it's holding number 72 or false start number 72 or whatever that is. But I think that just gives you a different mental toughness and a different character, that it's over time. Now you've got to be consistent. And so there were years where there were games where we didn't run the ball for more than 80 or 90 yards, but no penalties, no holding calls, no self-inflicted wounds. So while we were growing as linemen, we learned from that part of it, just
Yeah.
being consistent and not being excellent, but just being good at what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think that, I think I want to get into your transition from, your playing days to now being an executive within the league. But just, there's obviously a ton of lessons that we can talk about of what you took from playing that you carry over into, your day to day in your job now. But when did you start thinking about, or how did you start thinking about, while you were playing, your post career, how you're going to spend your time? What was that like? What was that process like? And when did you start thinking about that?
Well, the funny part is in college, I was a fifth year senior at Louisville, and I think I got injured my freshman year or something, and then I got redshirted. But I was a fifth year senior, so I was in grad school my senior year, and I was a part of the first student athlete advisory board, like 90 and 95, 96 at Louisville. I led all the community service events on our team. So I was a leader on campus, and I was a leader respectively for however I could maximize my experience back then. But from the day that I got to the NFL, I was going to graduate school in the off season. I was doing internships. I interned with two congressmen on Capitol Hill during I grew up in DC, interned with two congressmen on Capitol Hill. I got my master's degree. We did a job shadow fellowship at Pepsi Bottling Group. So when I hear student athletes saying, we can't do internships like everyone else, we can't do 11, well, you don't have 11 weeks. Do you have 1 week? Can you do a job shadow? You can do Zoom calls now. You could do panels. You can digital learning. I mean, so there's so many opportunities that student athletes and professionals can do to really ensure that the concept back then was always keep one foot in the parking lot.
Mhm.
And so you had to keep one foot in the parking lot, if you will, in terms of what life would be like if you weren't playing. And so one of my best friends actually lives in Chicago. He's my best friend, Chad Walker. He'll be embarrassed if I call him out, but we were roommates in college. And he, after Louisville, he went to law school, started working at a firm, went to University of Wisconsin Law School, and I saw him grow as an attorney. And when he came out of law school, then I was a free agent. And we both,
Yeah.
and so I always lived vicariously through what he was doing, because I'm like, man, what would I be doing if I wasn't in the NFL? I probably would have gotten a master's, got a GA, got my master's degree. And so I just never kept my eye off the bigger picture. And I didn't do anything crazy in terms of my time. I just maximized my time. I mean, how many times can you go to South Beach and hang out, or Vegas as a pro athlete? I mean, once or twice is okay, but you can't get consumed with that stuff. And I think it was always important to I think education was always important to me. And I always just wanted to maximize my time.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to just reset here and welcome everyone that's joining us on PCA's Facebook page. If you're watching us on Facebook, type in the chat, let us know where you're from, and if you have any questions, and those that are on the webinar here, I've seen a couple questions come in that we'll get to. But Roman, I want to, you mentioned growing up in DC and being the first Cameroon-born player in the NFL. I want to, before you got to that point, what was it like just when you first got to the States, and what impact did sports have on how you became part of the community, or how you were able to make friends and things like that? Just talk about that experience a little bit.
I see one of the questions from Kevin Skelly.
Yeah.
He was it was a HAT program when I was a kid, a higher achievement program. And I think, and I think that because I just want to preface this by saying just, the value of having great teachers, guidance counselors, positive people in your life. You never know what impact you're going to make on a 10-year-old kid, honestly. Or whatever, the 15-year-old kid, if that matter, if you're in high school. But I think early on, I just had good role models. And ask me the question again that you wanted me to specifically.
Just how, making, when you came to the States, and what
Yeah.
sports played in that, and how that, allowed you to make friends.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of kids, it's it keeps you out of trouble after school and all that stuff. But I think for me, sports gave me confidence. I was, growing up in Washington, D.C., I've got the Doug Williams. You see the Doug Williams, first African-American quarterback. Then it was called the Washington Redskins, obviously. But I think you had to have heroes. You had to have people that inspired you. And I think it was important that we all were Skins fans, and we all watched it on TV and watched Georgetown basketball and all that growing up, growing up in DC. But I think sports just gave me confidence. And I didn't play organized football until 10th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was on vacation with my aunt who lived in Atlanta at the time. Came back first day of school. I wanted to play football, and I didn't know. My mom didn't know that they actually had tryouts like in July and August. They had workouts all summer. I had no idea. And so I had to come back the next year and play. But it was at the scrutiny of saying, "Oh, you should play football." I was probably 6 feet tall, 200 pounds as a freshman. Hadn't lifted weights or none of that stuff. I threw the shot put, and so then I actually did track first, and really built my conditioning and plyos and all that, and into the summer, and then played football. So It was really by chance. I didn't grow up with a football in my hand. I didn't grow up with saying I'm going to play in the NFL or play for the Washington, Redskins team at the time. But it was just important to me to just do something I felt confident in. And then something happened, something clicks that next year. You're just beating everybody. You're better than everybody. I'm just swimming, moving people. I thought I was a defensive lineman back then, not an offensive lineman. But I think it was great for me to, and I think anyone who has children or coaches children, it's great to see the development of a child, that mindset to go from that introduction to adoption to behavior change. I always talk about those three phases of learning. I think that was what happened to me through the game of football as it led to my understanding the game, as it led to confidence. And then you become, all of a sudden you turn 15, you start lifting weights, you start being confident in those sort of things. And I think that's what led to it. And then the letters came and recruiting and all that stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. So we got some good questions coming in here. So I'm going to bounce around to a couple questions. We have two of probably our youngest viewers right now, Benji and Sam in the DC area, but they wanted to ask who your favorite teammate to play with was and why.
I played on 4 teams for many years, for 12 years. And I think I always loved the offensive lineman in the room. And so and then I was always close to the backs. We always loved the running back. So going back, Tiki Barber, Tyrone Wheatley, when I was at the Giants early on, were great. Amani Toomer was my roommate. We were rookies together. Ike Hilliard was one of my best friends. We were teammates. Even in Cleveland, Tim Couch, some of those guys. Jamel White was a running back, special teams guy. In Tampa, I got close to Michael Pittman. And, it was always, and then LaDainian Thompson, I would say at the end there at the Chargers. So you always got to be close to running backs. And I think they always buying food and taking care of their linemen and all that stuff. So
Take care of them.
Usually you hate defensive guys, right? Because you always practice against them, but you want them to do well in the game.
Right.
Because you're wearing the same uniform. But yeah, we went out. I was always like, had the more outgoing personality. So I was always like trying to get guys in the restaurant through the back and, cut the line and the stuff like that. So that was always my role. So let's say LT would sit in the car and I'd be like, let me just try to get us in so you don't have to stand in line and have people be around you and stuff. So that was fun.
Great. That's great. Another question coming in from Scott Ellis. There seems to be so much focus on rookies playing immediately now, like quarterbacks and others. But, earlier you talked about just the importance of veteran players and how that experience is vital. So how do you think about the way rookies are treated today and the expectations for them to be great immediately and the impact that has on them?
Well, I think sometimes some things I have to put on my glasses. Sorry. Some things are fan driven. And I think that fan perception drives a lot of that. And it's like, I saw this kid be really good and productive in college and he could help us next year because of my fantasy league or because of this or that. But we've also seen a lot of quarterbacks, first round picks, that just didn't succeed. 3 years later, they're out of the league. And I think a few times I've asked myself the question, and some teammates that I've had that were first round picks or high draft picks that didn't succeed, if this guy was a 5th round pick, would he have had a better career? Because he couldn't deal with the pressure walking into a locker room, having to succeed, $10 million check, all that stuff. And so I think there's a lot less patience for rookies to come in as certain skilled players. It's still easier to adjust if you're a quarterback, corner. If you're a receiver, corner, defensive lineman, you can rush the passer, you can return punts, you can integrate yourself into there. I was a left tackle. It's hard to be a left tackle to start as a rookie. So you look at what Mekhi Becton did for the Jets this year, or some of those guys that played and started as rookies. But I also think that there's a sameness in football between the college and the NFL game than there wasn't 10 or 20 years ago.
Right.
You had to be the traditional NFL quarterback to succeed. And if you were this RPO guy, I mean, anyone who's old enough to remember like Marvin Graves at Syracuse or Charlie Ward, I mean, those guys would have probably been great RPO quarterbacks now in today's football, but those guys back then couldn't transition the NFL. I mean, obviously Charlie Ward wanted to play basketball, and Marvin Graves, I think, played in Canada, but those guys are like the best quarterbacks. Athletic, can run, throw. Sure. That was seen as a negative thing, but those now, Lamar Jackson, all these guys out here. I mean, there's like 10 Michael Vicks now. There used to be like one Michael Vick or one guy one Randall Cunningham if they go a little older.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the game has definitely changed, but I think fans still have to deal with the appetite of wanting your local team to succeed, your local organization that you root for, and then wanting to make sure that your fantasy league, you're not
Right.
driven by this appetite of like who in your fantasy league is
Right.
going to do well this week.
No, that's good. That's good. Another question from Andrew Shriver. In team sports, how does winning a championship or not winning a championship impact the measurement of success for an individual player?
It's always the measure. It's always the measure. I mean, look at the basketball argument.
Yeah.
I know Shaq has taken a beating by criticizing some of these young guys that have big contracts. Is look, win a championship.
Yeah.
Don't do it with the super team. Go win a championship. Go lead an organization. I think in football, um, there's been organizations that have been a lot more successful historically.
Hmm.
I came from an era where like no AFC teams, I think for a period of time, no AFC teams won the Super Bowl until the Broncos won it, 97, 98. And then you saw 2000 and the Patriots came in. So I lived through, I always tell my kids that when I was a kid that the Cowboys were really good, the Washington team was really good. The Bears won it, they had the best defense. And I was like, really? They were that good when you were, I was like, yeah, really good. I said the Bengals were really good. I
Right.
think so. I think sometimes every decade something shifts. You get that good quarterback
Hmm.
like Tom Brady did in New England for many years, or you get that cohesion. But it's important, especially as an offensive lineman, if you have a good running back and you have a good cohesion, a good team, you try to keep that core together, and then at least you have a 4 or 5 year run where you could try to at least advance to the championship game.
Yeah, that's great. I want to shift a little bit because you talked about your kids, and you've coached. One of your sons is in college playing football. You have another in high school playing football, and you've coached. So when you think about yourself as a coach, was there a coach that you tried to model yourself after, or and I think a second question and add on to that is just when you think of the phrase positive coaching, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So two things. I think there's always this old school term that you got to run through the wall for your coach. You got to run through the wall, and I think nobody's going to run through a wall for you, quote unquote, unless they know that you care about them.
Mhm.
And so I had great coaches, and I think you just had to coach a kid differently back then because I mean, frankly, coaches didn't know better. It was do as I say or I'll get rid of you,
Right.
or the language how you spoke to our coach spoke to an athlete was different. I'm glad a lot of those things have changed, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think you can. So I think you can. So one thing you can still maximize and get the most out of a kid if you can reach and know how to communicate to them. There's not one way to communicate to everybody, but I think you still need to provide structure and discipline in the way that seems fit to that group. Now, an urban versus a suburban versus a rural situation are all different in terms of how they lead, obviously. But Coach Joe Jackson and Coach Maddox, my high school coaches at Gonzaga High School in Washington D.C.,
Mhm.
I think they were disciplinarians, and I knew that they cared about me. And they always talked about I was a young African American male, and in the 80s, and at a time where you were told that you were more likely to go to jail than go to college, and I think some of those issues still exist in urban areas. But I knew that they wanted the best out of me, and they knew how to get out of me. I
Yeah.
think now when I look at that plight or that stretch that I made, and I look at how I talk to my kids, I don't over preach about what I went through when I was your age. I don't. We had it rougher than you. I try not to be that guy.
Yeah.
But I do try to just make sure that I'm inclusive. I listen. I have to give them a why.
Yeah.
It's important to be flexible because it'll help you prevent injury. It'll help. I have to get into the science of it all
Yeah.
versus you better be able to do a deep squat or else you'll suck. I mean, you can't say
Yeah.
that to kids now.
Right.
You can't say that to kids. So I try to take the best of what I learned as a child and how people were able to reach me and take some of that stuff and build it into being a better. I mean, I didn't grow up with a dad in my house.
Yeah.
So I try to grow up and try to give some of those elements to my boys now. And speaking of which, and I grew up in the hip hop generation and
Mhm.
Tupac and Biggie and all that stuff. But I always say, and I've seen a lot of my peers fail. I said, look, I tell my sons now, I'm not the hip hop dad. I'm not the cool dad. I'm your dad first. I'm cool. I know your language. I know, but it's discipline, it's structure, it's
Totally.
giving you the capacity to succeed, giving you the structure. So that's important also.
Yeah. Tell us more about the experience of coaching your sons and just the do you think you have I feel like when professional athletes are then coaching their kids, they have a different mindset than, parents that haven't played at that high level. So just
Yeah.
why do you think there's that difference, or what was your outlook, and how do you think your outlook is different because you played professionally?
I think it's. I felt honestly, I felt bad for my sons growing up because when you always treat the bigger kid like his size and not his age.
Right.
And from the time they played t-ball, my younger son, I remember my wife still has these videos when they're like 3 years old. He's probably 4 feet tall. Everyone's like 2 feet tall, whatever that is, right? And everyone's just expecting them to be great athletes as soon as they step on the field, and they don't realize that just this, there's the physical evolvement of kids. Like if you're taller and lankier and a little uncoordinated, you're further away from the ground. You're not as coordinated. If you're a shorter, quicker kid, you usually have a lot more coordination. Eventually, that tall kid fills out and all that stuff. So I wasn't the crazy dad on the sidelines. I always kind of the Tony Dungy, James Caldwell kind of
Yeah.
stood in the corner because I always had to get the opinions on the sidelines about everything else going on in the world, including the Giants, Jets,
Right.
whatever, Lakers, and then everything else that was going on. I was just there for my kids. So I think when they got to high school is when I started to turn up the intensity in terms of, you've got to strike with your hands, because if you walk into a college campus with good hands, good hand usage, that'll help you be a better college player. So I
Mhm.
was able to turn it on a little bit differently in high school, but I never underestimated the value of just being a kid, having fun, win, lose, or draw. Like, don't say anything in the car for 30 minutes. And I would read this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I try to be a better parent, when as my kids, because I saw, let's say when they were in first grade, I would see the fifth grade kids, like some of their kids had older brothers. I'd see
Mhm.
dads are crazy and screaming, and you could just see the body language. I was like, bro, that's not it, bro. We gotta do better than that, man. So I try to make sure, and I'm a large, imposing guy.
Yeah.
I try to make sure that I try to balance it out by, and people would say, "Oh, you're such a nice guy, man. I thought you'd be this crazy, just yeah, of course you did, but again, that's perception for you."
I want to stay on the high school and the transition to college. We have a question. What do you think are the biggest challenges high school athletes face today in pursuing their sport at the college level? And what do you think there are ways for them to overcome those challenges?
This is an easy one, and I deal with this now because I have my older son's in college and younger son's a junior in high school. I said,
Mhm.
you've got to see through the smoke screen in recruiting, and you've got to make sure that you're dealing with football and academics and not attention.
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids are posting a lot of stuff and announcing everything, and it's like, I'm announcing my offer, I'm announcing how many offers I have, then I'm announcing I'm in the transfer portal 2 years later, then I'm announcing that I'm, everything's an announcement, and so I don't know if LeBron takes credit for that when he made the announcement to go to Miami or whatever that is, but I think the biggest challenge is just dealing with the emotions of walking on a campus. It's not just about you, and that same coach that recruited you,
Yeah.
if you're not that good in a year and a half, if you're not too deep on the roster in a year, they're gonna tell this another kid the next year the same thing they told you, and then that coach might leave.
Yeah.
So make sure you choose a school and not the coach. Make sure you ask the right questions. Make sure you're just mentally ready to be away from home, and make the best decisions you can about the bigger picture, about where you think you have the best environment to succeed. Big campus, little campus, urban campus, suburban campus,
Yeah.
close to home, far away from home. And it's tough. It's tough making these adult decisions when you're 16, 17 years old. But I think if you have the right guidance, and if you don't have these superficial things around you about recruiting, name, image, and likeness is the thing now. That a lot of people are saying, well, I'm more marketable in this market than I'm. No, you're not. But I think kids have so much stuff in their brain. There's so much info that if you could get through that smoke screen, if you will, you'll actually adjust a lot better when you get on campus.
That's great. That's great advice. Thanks for that. I do want to give you the opportunity just to talk a little bit about your role currently within the league office, and you do a lot you focus a lot on the league's initiatives around youth football. So maybe just talk to us about your day to day and really the focus on making sure that youth football is being played around the country and it's safe and it's a good experience. So maybe if you could just walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I came to the league office December 14. Came in as a director of player health and safety, focusing on youth football. So at that time we were in the middle of we just announced a 5-year commitment with USA Football to promote safety and, heads up football and some of the things back then, going back 2013, 2014. And so I was responsible, at least back then, just to make sure that programmatically that, USA Football, some of our partners were really executing against the investment into youth football, into safety, parents messaging, the concussion movie was about to come out. So it was really a crazy time for us. And then that narrative about playing football, whether or not you should play, had really permeated into the minds of the parents. And even some former players that said they wish they'd never played, they won't let their kids play. So I think we had to do a lot to make sure that, one, my number one priority is to serve the 32 clubs, because their 32 owners are my boss too.
Yeah.
Make sure that all 32 clubs, their youth strategy, their engagement and community engagement strategy are consistent with what's a good marriage between the league initiatives and then obviously the club's initiative. So it's in Chicago, it's the Bears. I have to make sure that the McCaskey family, the Bears organization are executing the things in their community that are consistent with what's whether that's through research, working with other partners, and so that part of it. And then you work with great partners like Nike. We launched 11 on. We're doing a lot of women's and flag initiatives, NFL flag. I'm the liaison to some degree for some of the compliance issues on, you have some NFL teams that share college facilities, Tulane, the Saints, Pittsburgh, University of Steelers with the University of Pitt, some of those things. So I do a lot, but I think it's a big picture. Just make sure that the NFL has at least a top level approach and a strategy to how to help evolve and promote the game of football at the young level. So it's, youth is a lot of messaging to parents, a lot of making sure that we're educating properly. High school is a different research. Why are kids playing, injury tracking, some of that stuff. Why kids aren't playing. You're seeing a big growth in flag and a little bit decrease in tackle, but we still see it as football engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously as they get into college, it's college outreach as well. So I kind of run the gamut across the board. And we have a staff and we have a lot of people that work on it too. But it's great work. I always say that I serve a game that gave me more than I could ever give back. And it's always an honor to work with folks like you and be in this organization because of my career and because of things that I did to academically and to prepare myself, in the business world as an executive. I mean, it enables me to be a good steward of the game in this capacity now as an adult. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up still, but I'm sure.
Well, we're thrilled to have you as part of PCA's National Advisory Board. And we have about 10 more minutes left here. I want to thank everyone for submitting questions that we're going to try to get through now. Those of you that are joined on Facebook, please comment. And those that are in the Zoom chat, thanks for sending those in. So Roman, I want to shift a little bit to two questions around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first being, we're seeing more women in the NFL as coaches, as referees. There's going to be a woman as a referee in the Super Bowl. We've seen Sarah Fuller at Vanderbilt, play on the football team. What are your thoughts about just women in the game of football and starting to see more and more of them in the game over the last couple of years?
I think it's, I played on the Louisville team. Kathy Klopp she was actually the first female kicker. Back then there was that loophole where you could do a fifth year on another sport. Mm-hmm. So she tried to kick, and Ron Cooper was the head coach at the time. And we had, it was like an extra point. We were winning 35 to whatever. And I was like, let her kick the extra point, and then he didn't do it. And so when I saw this happen, it was great. And I think that it's great to see that the game is evolving. I think women, have a place in this game as coaches, as players in certain degrees. And I think we need to continue to be inclusive about that, about including everyone. Troy Vincent, our EVP of football operations, always has this quote that says, diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. So we have to deliberately and intentionally be inclusive to everyone that contribute to this game. Can't have the factory here and then the board up here. No, you've got to have everybody, every part of a building, every part of an organization has to look like the rest of the world, rest of the country.
Yeah. And with that said, I mean, looking like the rest of the world, looking at the country, When you look at the another hot topic in the news right now is just the number of black head coaches in the NFL, representing how many players in the NFL are black. And, I think we've seen a couple waves of, with the implementation of the Rooney Rule and other things like that, but that now we've gone through another, hiring process with no black head coaches being hired. So what do you like? How do you think we can improve that, or the league can improve some of those things?
I think we have to continue to do the programs that we're doing now.
Yeah.
The Bill Walsh Minority Fellowship, the Rooney Rule affects all positions, not just coaches. I mean, you've seen more African American general managers. You've
Yeah.
seen more in the front office. I think we obviously I'm not a coach at the professional level, but we have to see more people of color in boardrooms and on the business side. I think everyone has to contribute to that. I think just from a coaching standpoint, every NFL owner still has the autonomy to ultimately hire who they want to lead their organization, but we just have to make sure that the process is fair, and you're getting the right people. If Mike Tomlin never gets a chance to actually just have a seat, I mean, we're the same age. He was my DB's coach when I was at the Buccaneers, um, um, and we're both like 29 years old. I was like, this guy's gonna be a head coach one day. And we even back then, I said, man, I hope he gets a chance to coach at a good team. And look what he's done. I mean, he's probably the most successful coach. I mean, regular season, not about just Super Bowl wins, but to piece teams together and still go 9-7 like he did last year, or 8-8, whatever. I think it was amazing. And so, but again, that's Mike Tomlin. That's one guy. And I think we still need to continue to push the button and ownership wants to win games and want to make sure that their organizations are succeeding. And I think, but we can always do better. We can always do better. And college isn't off the hook either. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more African American players in the FBS and some on the college side. And so university presidents also have to play a part in this role as well.
Great. You were. I want to go back to your experience. You were coaching your son in high school this past year, and as an assistant coach, and just talk about the experience just going through, COVID and having to coach in that experience, and just how that also has impacted, what the league's been doing when it comes to youth football. And so, just what impact do you think that have? Hopefully, we're coming out of it, and when we get to next fall, there might be some sense of normalcy. But just talk about that experience and what the league's learned, what you've learned on how we can get through that.
Yeah, it was really tough this year, and you almost had 50 different models of what was going to make sense. I live in New Jersey, in the tri-state area, which is really New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. New Jersey decided to play, New York City didn't, and so we had kids transferring across the state to go to school so they can play football. We had states like Florida that played, and some states were more liberal about the pandemic because it really hadn't hit them in the summer.
Yeah.
Like it hit the East Coast. California, it hit them later, so it's affecting them now. But for me, coaching, it was more than just showing up. You had to wear your mask, you had to wear your neck gaiter, you had to sanitize. Seniors were in the weight room getting changed while the freshmen were in the gym and the juniors and sophomores were somewhere else. I mean, you had to deal with that on top of just trying to win a game. And I think it was really challenging. I think the football part of it made it the best part, though.
Yeah.
Because my son and my children already go to St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City. And so you have to take a subway train to go to school. It's not just get a ride. I mean, a lot of kids carpool and parents figure it out, but we have a lot of kids that take public transportation to go to school. There's no school bus to Catholic school. It's an old Catholic school in the old part of the Jersey City. So I think that the sacrifices that I saw the kids make, and I think when you look at the people that criticize the game and criticize football, they never talk about the sacrifice. And most of those kids aren't going to play D1 or go. They're going to go to college and have business degrees, engineering degrees, or what have you. But I think for me, as a coach, you always learn a lot about yourself when you're around a lot of kids, and you learn you develop your patience. You learn how to engage a lot of kids. That kid on scout team holding the bags, who's not going to play, and especially up here in November, it's pretty cold. You're standing on the sidelines trying to hug up. It's like these kids are all I always joke around, time for you guys having a cigarette break in there in that huddle. It's all cold. No, it's you got to show everyone that everyone's valued, because, and I think that's where you talk about the parent is a little different now. The crazy quarterback dad and those sort of things that exist out there in the world in youth sports and high school sports. Um, I just try to lead by example and try to show a good example of the knowledge that I have from playing, and then to say I'm not the crazy dad. I'm more instructional. I put my arm around a kid,
Yeah.
ask him how he's doing, what he ate for lunch that day, what he's going to eat for dinner. I mean, those things are still important. And that's how you can really maximize the kid in here before you even talk about the X's and O's or the technique.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. One of the things you talked about was just that, like, the football part of it was the best part, right? And so, I think what we've seen over the last year of being away from sports is that, you know, what we're missing from that experience. It's the camaraderie with your teammates, with its relationship with the coaches. It's the lessons that we're learning. So hopefully, this could be a little bit of a reset for how we look at youth sports. And I want to dive in on just that topic of just like this whole idea of, the win at all cost environment that has taken over youth sports. And, as someone that's played at the highest level where, winning where it was a business, you had to win. But when you think about youth sports, what role should winning play? Like at PCA, we want to teach life lessons, but winning is one of those goals that we want to, that's part of sports. You want to win. So, we're not anti competition. We're not everybody gets a trophy, but what are your thoughts on just what's the appropriate emphasis or not on winning in youth football?
I think there's nothing wrong with keeping score, and I know there's always this discussion about everyone deserves a trophy, and that's the generation we live in now, and all that. But I think it's more important about what do you get out of winning? Like, what do you learn about? What do you get out of the experience?
Yeah.
When a kid's in the car and you're headed to the ice cream shop after a game, win, lose, or draw, is the kid going to have a smile on his face, or is he going to quit and never come back? And I think because of the criticism that we've dealt with in football, the health and safety criticism, and I would, to be honest, like other sports have benefited from that because I would say it's more dangerous to play the same sport 10 months a year,
For sure.
than it is to play football 3 months a year. But that's a different discussion. But I think honestly, every parent has the right and their responsibility to make sure that it's about make sure your kid has a good experience.
Yeah.
The win at all cost, I just don't agree with that. I've been on the other sidelines where we were hospitable, we shook hands, and then you have coaches on the other side that were talking crap and they were jumping up and down, and it was about them and not about the kids.
Yeah.
And so I just you pull guys to the side and say, hey man, it's about the kids, man. We had our eligibilities up, man. We're good. We got to make sure these kids are, because but also see that a lot of coaches know that they have a short window, or some of these kids have a short window, that kids like my kids eventually catch up and get bigger, and so they won't be as good when they get older. So they really want to focus on this all-star middle school kid, this all-star fourth grade, travel kid. And I think over time, outside of the physical stuff, stress fractures and some of the things, just that social disassociation that you get from just being disengaged. I think one thing the pandemic did one or two things. Kids either can't wait to get back outside finally,
Yeah.
or they're never going to go back outside again because they've been so engaged with the virtual stuff and the video games that it's actually going to get worse. So that's more obesity, more kids on the couch. I mean, that's the problem we're really fighting here. And I just hope that every parent, to their own extent, can do their part in making sure the kid has a great experience. Because really, at the end of the day, like, I can't name everyone who won the Super. I'd have to think about it. Who won the college national championship every year from 91 to 95 when I was in college? I have no idea. I think Miami won one year. I don't remember who was. And I certainly don't remember who won my JV or my Pee Wee, whatever. I don't know. I have no idea. So I think parents have to always keep that in hindsight.
Awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on the end of this right now, and so I'm going to get you out on one more question. But I do want to thank you for joining us today and answering all these questions, and for being part of PCA's National Advisory Board. So I know you probably can't make a prediction, but what are you most looking forward to watching about in the Super Bowl? What are you excited about seeing that night?
I'm really excited. I know some people have some questions. They could just like DM me on Twitter. I just put my Twitter name. It's just
Awesome.
at R_OBEN.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll change it in my thing here. So I'm Twitter. So I think with the Super Bowl and Bruce Arians, just changed my name. So Bruce Arians was my offensive coordinator in Cleveland in 2001, and then Todd Bowles was the DB's coach. And so I think and I saw that dynamic, both Temple guys and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Todd Bowles' answer is to Kansas City's offense.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that because I mean we talk about the black coaches. I mean Bruce has 3 black coordinators.
Coordinators, yeah. Yeah.
And I think one of them's two, and two of them are former players.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's really going to be interesting because at some point Kansas City's offense will just break you,
Yeah.
But then you got Tom Brady on the other side. You've got a guy that's not going to throw a poor pass in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
He's been to 10th Super Bowl in 20. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's insane. So I think one thing about watching the Super Bowl, the football fan in you comes out and you're watching the matchups. And, I don't care about the commercials, but I watch the matchups and who's going to break down and the coverages. And I think that football person in me comes out because that's every kid that's ever put on a pair of pads is going to watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Every coach that's ever coached at any level is going to watch that game. So, and the fact that I played in that game and it doesn't really hit you how important that game is until you look back on it. But I'm looking forward to seeing the matchups and how they address a lot of those issues.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to call you on something, Roman. You say you don't care about the commercials, but the way you and I first connected was the PCA Super Bowl commercial probably 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
you tweeted about it, and I followed up, and a budding friendship since then. But
well, that's how it was so substantial. I was like, what is that? I had to tweet about it. So, that's why it moved me, man. That's why I love it. I didn't care about commercials, and I saw that one. Then I reached out. So,
and now we got you. So thank you so much. I want to thank TeamSnap, who helps support this speaker series that PCA provides and is a great partner of ours. And everybody go follow Roman on Twitter. If you have questions, send them his way. We'll be able to send out a recap of this conversation to everybody that attended. I also want to we talked a little bit about more women in the NFL. I want to remind everybody that February 3rd is National Women and Girls in Sports Day, and we will be hosting another roundtable that day, so keep your eye out for an invitation on that. But Roman, thanks again for your time, and we look forward to continuing the relationship with you and you being a part of our National Advisory Board. So thank you very much.
Yep, my pleasure. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And thanks again. Look forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right, perfect.